Two dead man talking. Tonight's story is the next installment from the wonderful mind of Mr. Savage. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Nightmare of Winter. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. Letter from General Franklin D. Abrams to United States Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson. Wednesday, February 19th, 1941. Warning: highly classified information. Mr. Secretary, I would like to update you on Project Nebula. Location: rural, redacted county, near redacted Georgia. Project Nebula, as you know, is our effort to contribute to our allies engaged in a great war. Serum XV999-CFD4 shows highest potential for congruent healing capabilities throughout all current subjects. Wounded subjects heal within minutes. This serum has the capability to become a key factor in aiding our allies. There have, however, some side effects present throughout our extensive testing. All 100 current subjects have undergone extensive muscle growth and have lost all sense of self-preservation. Lead physician Melanio believes this is due to the use of proteins and RNA from the rabies virus that were used to stabilize the serum's interaction with the brain and frontal cortex. Another side effect is, while dramatic and unsettling, less worrisome, DNA taken from oceanic algae cultures have caused bioluminescent glowing in the eyes. Further testing is necessary before field trials are warranted. Requesting 30 days further from original deadline. Sincerely, Frank D. Abrams. Tyler Hillmark watched as Amanda put the Dodge into drive and began driving down the south trail towards the dirt road. He prayed to himself silently as he kicked the Yamaha into gear that she would have the cavalry head in this direction soon. This nightmare had become a horrific ordeal, and he knew well that whatever hellish monstrosity had turned Johnny into that abomination, and he just emptied bullets into, could be nothing of this natural earth. What he couldn't have known is that the rifle rapport from earlier hadn't been Mark nor Michael killing a deer. It had been Johnny's 7mm Magnum put in hot steel through a lock-on 10-foot tall wrought iron fence containing secrets from over half a century before. Dark secrets the government of the United States would prefer to keep buried in suspended animation for the rest of eternity. An evil that modern weapons could only subdue for the limited amount of time while the regeneration process took place. Tyler nor any of his friends could have fathomed the unimaginable level of evil that lay buried and near forgotten in that isolated 4-acre patch of wilderness. Likely it would have remained hidden for centuries further, warded in place by the confines of those cold moss and algae-ridden grey bars of iron. Johnny disturbed the one final failsafe ingrained within the things that lie dormant for so many years. The natural resonance of the earth amplified by the iron bars caused the mutated serum to become inactive and allowed the host to rot as though they were any corpse. Once the gate swung free, this frequency was disrupted and the ward broken. Johnny walked upon the hallowed ground as glowing blue eyes opened, and bodies of so many test subjects and contaminated personnel began to reanimate. He walked through the heart of the rows of mass graves of half-decayed hands clawed at the earth from below. Once the first hand broke free into the icy mist and rain above it, I was too late to reverse this foul action. By the time Johnny saw the first pair of menacing blue eyes illuminating the late afternoon fog and mist, the fates of he and his friends and so many others were forever changed. I barreled down the eastern trail at a brisk pace. I noticed the blue glowing orbs behind me as they began pouring into the camp as it disappeared from view. I noticed them here and there along the trail, and they were terrifying beacons of receding hope. It took all 20 minutes to arrive to the bloodbath that lay midway to the end of the eastern trail. Mark's Polaris Ranger was ploughed into a thicket of small pines. Michael was in pieces, being devoured by the unholy abominations as they turned their cold, dead eyes to the bright beam of light pouring from the front of my four-wheeler. Mark was further away, back in the opposite direction, and two of the bastards were tearing his intestines from his abdomen as he was rasping for breath and escaped his eviscerated throat in an attempt to scream. I dismounted in a feral rage, unleashing a hellstorm of 7.62 full metal jackets. I timed my discharges, breathing steady, aiming for the head. I had all but 3 of the things down when I stopped to swap to a fresh 30-round magazine. I ejected the spent magazine and was jamming a fresh one into the magwell as one of them hit me from behind. My predatory senses felt the blow coming, and my inhuman reflexes allowed me to compensate for the follow-through. Using the momentum of the attack to spin, bringing the barrel of the weapon into my attacker's eye, I released the bolt and pulled the trigger, sending a black spray of blood and brain matter. 2 bullets, one of which found the chest of one of the other monstrosities behind the first attacker. The second, finding its head, blew the barrel of my carbine from the creep's eye socket. I downed 2 more that were approaching from behind before spinning and dealing hot lead into the skulls of the remaining 3 I was originally engaging. I stopped to breathe, the gravity and anger swirling through my body like a nuclear-driven hurricane at the sight of my dismantled friends laying on the ground. Mark had succumbed to the mortal injuries he'd sustained. Many things streamed through my mind. My vision blurred and my body shook. I was furious. My soul was shattering. My self-inflicted mental torment vanished as I heard the sound of heavy crashing footfalls. My shoulders dropped. I dodged behind the nearest tree, taking cover as 2 giant blue headlights, that were the eyes of this massive being, appeared 30 feet above in the trees. What the fuck is this Resident Evil-ass motherfucker? I thought as the lumbering behemoth came into full view, smashing through trees like a bulldozer. I opened fire, directly attacking the face of the beast. My rounds were like flies as it slowly ambled towards my position. The last round in my magazine contacted its enormous left eye, and it bellowed an earth-trembling roar of pain. It reached down and grabbed my four-wheeler as though it was a child's toy and hurled it in my direction. I rolled out of the way, drawing from my pistol and unleashing the 10 remaining rounds, taking careful aim for the Leviathan's eyes. The great monster was closing the distance as my slide locked back. I dropped the pistol next to my carbine as I removed my boots. The fury swelled through me as I surrendered to the beast within. Black flames engulfed my body as fur poured from my flesh. My arms and legs grew long, my muscles and bones contorting. My jaw then elongated into a muzzle as my vision and my hearing went razor sharp. I grinned a wicked, predatory smile onto my unnaturally large wolf lips. I was 12 foot at the shoulder now that I had shed my human-like form. My howl tore forth like the sound of a twister in the bowels of hell. as the last of the black flames dissipated from my body. My glowing red eyes locked with those of the Titan before me. The confusion it displayed as it froze in curiosity of what it beheld in front of it was painted in a look of sheer shock across its rotten features. I gave no time nor quarter as I leapt forth, sinking my 10-inch fangs into the monster's throat, my breath like hot diesel exhaust as I rapidly shook my jowls like a pit bull with a new toy. The titan of a monster flowered, attempting to seek reprieve from the onslaught of my vicious assault. It bellowed through a torn jugular as it fell to the cold, icy ground. My jaws lashed repeatedly at the creature's throat and neck, and my horrible black claws tore into its eyes and nose as I found purchase to tear chunks of flesh from its neck and shoulders. My fangs punctured its scalp and plunged into its skull as I jerked and wrestled it, dragging it with me. A great sickening wet ripping sound filled the wilderness as its shoulders caught between two pines and its head, and a large portion of its spine tore free from its body. The black fire that poured from my lungs with each breath ignited the vast corpse of the rotten monstrosity. The beast was in control. Bloodlust screamed through my veins as I tore forth to unleash my deadly, supernatural wrath onto these undead abominations. The journey was short-lived as I came upon a murderous group of fiendish, vile things. Blue eyes were extinguished as my massive fangs tore through bone and rotten flesh. My massive paws swiped left and right, ramming 7 6-inch claws, desecrating the bodies before me as I took 2 legs. I tore an unholy warpath before me, fueled by anger, hatred, like unleashing hell fire. As I fought my way like a force of unbridled nature back into camp, I saw Johnny standing amongst the others as they rushed towards me. His blue eyes shone brighter than ever as my claws and my teeth tore his disfigured body to shreds. I stood panting, my breath blasting flames as I recovered my great wolfish form. Looking back up into the eastern trail, the rest I had previously killed, including a half-burned behemoth, were pouring at me like a river. I took back to 2 legs. I seized my pickup in a large paw and hurled the vehicle like a bullet passed straight into the big son of a bitch as it closed to around 100 yards or so. The titanic monster was blown off its feet, falling onto and crushing several of the smaller other ones as it slid backwards. The poor truck ricocheted off, continuing to fly a short distance before crashing into a few more of the things. Good luck explaining this to my insurance agent, I thought. I tore a medium-sized oak tree from the center of camp, and biting the trunk in half, I grasped the lower portion around 10 feet long. I took the log against the horde like a Louisville slugger, bashing them as though I was nailing them into the earth. I speared the big one through the chest as it rose, resorting back to claws and fangs as it took the never-ending onslaught like a demonic hurricane. As fast as I could rip them to shreds, they seemed to reanimate and regenerate back into their disfigured, unnatural forms. I was surrounded as whatever evil force driving them grew stronger and faster. I was an oppress of rotting corpses, with fiendish hands groping me and gnashing teeth tearing into my fur. I let out howls of fury as I bit and smashed and clawed everything in sight. My frustration fueled the apex predator as an unstoppable force crashed against unyielding objects. The Titan then smashed into me as we rolled and crushed bodies beneath us. My teeth and claws tore at him as he closed his jaws repeatedly into me, and his giant fists assaulted my snout and chest. And we rolled and crashed through the forest like some great wrestling match. I tore away from it, and then took back to 2 legs as we grappled again. I tore my claws into its face, I sunk fangs into every conceivable place. My legs buckled as my massive form tripped over fallen trees. The ground rattled as my gargantuan body fell to meet the cold, icy forest floor. The behemoth was upon me, and I felt the life being crushed from my lungs as its huge jaws closed around my throat. The others were on me as well, tearing and biting. My bright red glowing eyes were going dim, and the world was fading. "No!" I screamed in my head as another level of preternatural fury tore through my body. The adrenaline flushed through my massive werewolf veins as all of my muscles strained. Black flames poured from my claws and mouth as I shoved my paws into the giant's mouth. I tore his head entirely in half before I grasped at a deep breath. I took to his body like a turbocharged steel shredder, and I tore every piece of him to tiny bits. I broke every bone in my teeth. I tore every chunk of flesh to ribbons. I was absolutely done with this bullshit. I was upon the horde, ripping everything, whether abomination or tree or vehicle, to pieces. The beast was in control. This was the level that lay beyond beast mode. I crushed bone and tissue into nothing. As quickly as they could get up, I was on them like flies on dung. This game was becoming old, and the ice was growing thick. Freezing rain turned to sleet as I finally decided to leave. The big one hadn't regenerated and lay cold and silent in millions of tiny pieces. I then scooped my duffel bag into my teeth and stormed through the wilderness in the direction of civilization. I couldn't fight these things all night. I would burn out all of my energy. I would already be weak and worn out when I retook my human form. Everything I cared about was either dead or mangled behind me. There was no point in indulging the fruitless bloodbath any longer. Those things were hard to kill and even seemed to multiply at some rate when torn in half. Screw that. The police or military or somebody other than myself could deal with that roadside freak show from hell. Officer Ryan Kelly of the Georgia State Patrol was making his rounds through the long stretches of rural highway. He knew well that folks in these parts often enjoyed exceeding the speed limit and often had a few too many drinks. He had seen enough horrible wildlife crashes and DUI-induced wrecks on these country roads. People treated these sparsely populated highways like they were the autobahn. They only slowed down when approaching a town, and then soon as they cleared the town limit, they were back to doing 90 in a 55. It was nearly midnight, and freezing rain had fallen in a steady hard drizzle for more than 6 hours, before gradually transitioning to sleet that now pelted his windshield like furious little cannonballs as he drove along somewhere between 40 and 50 miles an hour. He was driving alert and careful, knowing the dangers of the black ice and accumulated sleet over the partially ice-coated asphalt. He slowed for a frozen bridge as he noticed an odd sight ahead. A dim light shone through the darkness and blurring sleet-filled air. As he approached, he called in for assistance from the nearby town, noting a semi that was overturned and after T-boning a pickup truck. He felt it was odd as he put on his flashing blue lights. There wasn't a crossing intersection here. Yet that truck looked as though it meant to drive directly across the highway. He figured that the truck had been travelling over speed and skidded past the stop sign. Ryan exited his patrol car to survey the scene. The beam of his Streamlight tactical flashlight illuminated the crash through the spitting of sleet. He noticed flakes of snow mingling with the tiny hail-like balls of ice. He first approached a big black Peterbilt laying on its side in the ditch. The driver's seatbelt was locked in the used position but opened, hanging askew. The open door indicated that the driver had climbed out. Ryan yelled for the driver, but there was no answer. He made his way to the blue Dodge Ram pickup, still sitting in the middle of the highway, and the passenger side mangled heavily. Ryan keyed his mic, reporting 1 deceased passenger and 2 missing drivers as the headlights, accompanied by blue flashing police strobes, topped the hill in the direction of the town. Ryan scratched his head, wondering where the drivers had gone. It seemed to him that they would have sustained injuries, and if they had taken to town on foot, well, surely they would have flagged down the local sheriff cars that were now slowing to approach him as he noted the red lights of an ambulance and the headlights of volunteer first responder vehicles. Peggy Hurst was a widowed wife of a timber mill foreman. Her husband Bill Hurst had passed 5 years ago at the age of 79. She had found difficulty sleeping in these last years due to her grief, but also contributed by her 19-year-old granddaughter Stephanie. Stephanie was often out late and preferred staying up all night and sleeping most of the day. She wasn't a bad child, but she could use some morals. Peggy had seen flashing lights of the police and ambulance pass her second-story window. Her and her late husband's home was a modest 2-story, 4-bedroom, colonial-style house that stood around 100 feet from the main highway on 8 acres of land. The land had a decent-sized field to the south and a woodland to the north. The property was just a few miles from the small town that was the county seat. Well, there wasn't much to do in the town these days, not like when the timber industry had been thriving. And there was a gas station, general store, a cafe, and a couple of little shops in town. Overall, things were quaint and quiet, as one would expect a tiny map dot like this old forgotten railhead. Well, that is an exception of the 20 or so cars that passed on the highway every couple of hours and the pack of ravenous raccoons that continually raided her garbage cans at night. Peggy heard faint crashing sounds outside. Letting out a sigh, she pulled on a heavy house robe over her nightgown and picked up her husband's .357 Magnum revolver loaded with shot shells. The rat shot wouldn't kill the varmints necessarily, but it would send them running for the night. And she held the pistol in her right hand, finger away from the trigger as she moved through the house. And there was another sound leading from the front of her home. It didn't make sense to her as the trash cans were behind the house. Her ancient left hand trembled slightly as she opened the locks on the front door. She let the door swing open as she fumbled for the light switch. The porch light illuminated the mist and sleet-laden air as a few snowflakes fluttered to the cold earth below. And at first, Peggy's old eyes saw very little out of place, until they landed on the man moving towards her from the side of her home. She raised her gun at him and spoke up. Who are you, and what business do you have on my land, child?" And there was no reply as ice formed in her old veins. And that's when she noticed the second one. A topless woman nearly to her. The strangeness of the sight made her suspicious. She leveled a revolver and fired into the woman's chest. The number 9 shot pellet struck the woman true, but she made no sound. The old woman let out a feral scream that echoed off the ice-laden trees bordering the yard, as she launched herself from the porch with inhuman speed and slamming her fangs into the throat of the woman embracing the topless thing with bone-crunching force, before reeling and shoving the glowing blue-eyed thing away from her. She retched at the taste of foul blood that filled her mouth. Stephanie, hearing her grandmother's feral shriek after the gunshot, burst from her Netflix show and sprinted to the window. She launched herself through the glass, landing on the man, sinking her own fangs into his throat. Black, rotten blood filled her mouth as she threw the man across the yard as if he was a football. She looked at her grandmother, who nodded, and Stephanie set upon the creatures with inhuman strength, ripping their heads from the shoulders and tearing their bodies limb from limb, as her grandmother held them in place, her grip like an iron vice. These things were evil, unnatural, and they were abominations that shouldn't exist. And both women knew these facts as soon as that decayed blood had reached their mouths. The two vampires could not believe their eyes as the two corpses began to stand again. No longer were they ripped apart, they were remade as they were before, now almost fully nude. The women looked at each other. Fear wasn't typically in their nature, and both women backed into the house, firmly bolting the door behind them as Peggy retched again. The bite on her arm from the struggle beginning to burn like hellfire. It was mid-morning as Veronica Lewis sat up in her bed. She ran a hand through her shoulder-length black hair before rousing her passed-out lover from the night before. She informed him that his business trip was over as he climbed from her bed. Within minutes, he was heading back to his lovely young wife, and she was making her way to the shower. And she was a real estate agent and did whatever it took to seal the deal, often sleeping with married men to ensure they couldn't back out on deals that provided her with commission. She hadn't had to report back to a man's wife or ruin any families so far through her 3 years of selling homes and entertaining unsure buyers. And she was 28 with a head-turning, voluptuous body. She looked like the big city had come to a podunk town, but in earnest she had picked up her modest abode for next to nothing and enjoyed a peaceful, rural setting. She exited the shower before toweling off and dressing in a simple t-shirt and blue jeans. She slid into a pair of cozy pink slippers with little black Playboy bunnies on the toe before making her way to the kitchen. She was pouring orange juice as wind gusted, and she heard the splintering destruction of a tree bursting as all the power cut. And she drew the curtains and looked out the big bay window of her kitchen at the icy winter mess strewn across her yard. The wind was now gusting, and still falling sleet was pounding against her window. The wind-driven fog and sleet falling in sheets made it look like a blizzard outside of her window. She opened her refrigerator, looking at the expired pack of lunch meat and about a cup's worth of 2% milk as she replaced a carton of orange juice. And she peered into her cabinets, only finding a couple of bags of rice and a few canned vegetables. And Veronica decided that she'd try to get to the general store before the entire town lost power. She wasn't even sure if she had a flashlight, and she got her wallets and keys, pulled on a black North Face jacket, and climbed into a brand new Chevrolet Tahoe. She failed to notice the dozens of bodies obscured in the fog moving towards her home as she pulled onto the highway carefully, avoiding a fallen tree as she heard the loud cracking of a limb breaking just off the road. The town limit was only 2 miles away from her home, and she smiled a few minutes after crossing the boundary as she saw the lights on Marty's general store and hardware. She made her way through the empty aisles as old Marty watched her in the mirrors mounted along the ceiling. She decided to purchase a camping stove and several bottles of propane. She figured she could at least have hot food and keep warm while cooking. She selected several groceries and lots of granola bars and junk food. She walked her little cart over to the counter where the old man eyed her warmly as he rung up her items. It had been a while since Marty had sold more than $30 worth of goods at once, and he felt grateful for the young woman's patronage. Not to mention, she was easy on the eyes, especially his old sunken, wrinkled eyes. He had been wary of the young woman only seeing her in his store a few times, buying things like duct tape and a hammer, occasionally some junk food or cans of soda. She was an outsider. He knew she was relatively new in town, but judging by the groceries and carefully manicured hand resting on the counter, she had more than a few dollars to her name. He punched in the last price label and keyed the tax and total buttons on his old register as she moved to the debit card reader as the power went out. He cussed under his breath as he went about to offer the young woman a line of credit in lieu of the dismal outdoor conditions when she retrieved cash from her wallet. Veronica was handing Marty the outstretched bills, and just before they could brush his calloused hand, she heard him mutter, "What the hell?" And she turned as he produced his daddy's old sawn-off double-barrel 12-gauge from under the register. She gasped and dropped the bills as both barrels fired at once, shoving the old man's wrist skyward. She stood in horror as one nude man crumpled to the floor in a spray of blood, as others, in various states of dress and decomposition, rushed into the store. Veronica and Marty had little hope as the woman was dragged to the floor in a wave of teeth and hands closing around her body. She felt her clothes tear, teeth sinking into her bare flesh, as she was too terrified to even scream as she was being eaten alive. The shopkeeper tried to turn to run towards the back room where he kept spare shells for the shotgun, but let out a deep scream of pain as hands seized his arm and teeth followed ripping his flesh. And within seconds there were more than an old man could count on him. He yelled and punched, but it was all in vain. His old heart gave out as he swung his wrinkled fist one last time, connecting with the skull of a nude woman. The Marine Corps graduation ring cracking the red-headed abomination's skull as his body went limp. Marty's eyes twitched as the woman lowered her mouth to his face, ripping at the flesh on his forehead. Wow, 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 wow. And another one. Wow. What a fantastic second installment to a brand new series from the wonderful Mr. Savage. Wow, wow. Thank you so much, brother. Absolutely awesome start to an incredible series, no doubt. Really like what you're working with here. Some fantastic angles and additives to the story that we don't usually see. Guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. A huge welcome to all of you brand new subscribers in the last couple of weeks. Been a fantastic surge in subscribers as we near the 30k mark. Lots and lots of hidden gems in the playlist section that you should definitely check out. Also, my True Encounters, True Stories and Reports playlist is an absolute guaranteed shocker and skin-crawling, chilling experience. And I do believe we have just passed about 630 or 40 videos on the channel. Just over 3 years. Absolutely amazed at that. There must be thousands of stories by now, and no doubt thousands and thousands of hours. Of course, if you have a story or a report or a true experience you want to share with us here on the show, please do get in contact with myself at my email, which is dmt.forresterfear@gmail.com. As ever, guys, I hope you're all focused and well and happy, keeping busy, but above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.